So I am a technologist. I'm a geek. I'm in Silicon Valley. Had a successful tech career. I've had a successful technology exit, and got into real estate in reverse. Most people get in basically because they want to do single-family rentals or because they want to do fix and flips. In my case, it was because my boss asked me to help him build a campus, a custom campus for our tech company from scratch in 2003. So over 12 months of fire hose education, I learned how to build a 27,000 square foot, $6 million building from scratch. So that was Introduction to Real Estate 101. So Grocapitus both buys and builds multifamilies, industrial, self-storage, and student housing projects. They're usually fairly large. The average project is about 200 units. We build them and buy them in 9 states in the union. None of them called California, even though I live in California. And we have about 500 active investors that are invested in our projects, and those investors are in 47 states in the country. I didn't decide to start the business. I fell into it. I mean, so there's so many parts of my story that have been a fell into something sort of, part of the story. So maybe I can take a couple minutes to answer that particular question. So we were doing this thing with building that new campus, and I was learning lots, things that I know that most multifamily syndicators don't know because they've never really built anything from scratch. And I started to fall in love with real estate, and specifically in love with the depreciation benefits of large commercial real estate. In 2004, because I was a partner in that project, for the first time, my salary was at a peak and my taxes were lower, and I really enjoyed that, even though I wasn't getting all the benefits because I wasn't a real estate professional. And that got me really excited, got me hooked to real estate. And then we went on and built 5 other campuses over the next 3 or 4 years. And by the time 2008, 2009 came around, I felt like I was really ready for real estate to jump in on my own rather than just building campuses for my company and investing in them. And my family was telling me that I was completely insane. I mean, I have this huge, massive family with 40 people, all telling me when I was talking with them about how excited I was in real estate, telling me how much of a fool I was and how, they would never talk with me again if I put any money into real estate. But I'm a data scientist. I'm a computer, science graduate, and I was looking at the numbers and I was saying, so you guys were all investing in real estate 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years ago. And now when I'm looking at real estate, it's so much better. It's massively better. And you're telling me not to invest? And they're like, yeah, we know better than you. We've invested in real estate. And I was like, no, what these people are not paying any attention to is the mathematics, the math, right? So a lot of real estate is really all about the math. So I decided that I would prove them wrong. And I did that by buying 10 single family homes in a single year. So I didn't want to just say, I bought this one off, because then my family would be like, no, you got lucky, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to buy 10 of them and make 10 of them successes to prove my point. So that's how stubborn I am. So, and we can go on with that story if you want, but the goal there really was, I got into real estate on a dare because my family was saying stuff which clearly to me was wrong. I felt like they were wrong. And that's, so the first thing I got in on a dare. And then when the time came to switch 5 or 6 years later into real estate on a full-time basis, not as a passive investor or as a single investor, that really came about because of a challenge that I took upon myself, an obsession about figuring out the best cities. I think that whenever I'm filled with that self-doubt, my mantra is to basically say, everybody started at the same point as me. Because there's nobody that I know of that started, unless they have generation wealth, right? Which most people don't. Everybody starts at the same point as me. And so when I say that, and I say it to myself very often, and I say to myself, not just with regards to business, but anything that I'm starting that's new, one of my favorite mantras is to reset my brain and say, everybody started that way. And if they didn't proceed, then no one would have ever done what I'm about to do. Absolutely no one in the world would have done it. Doing new things is always scary, but doing new things is how you bring value to your life. Here's another way of looking at this, right? So there's a lot of people listening to this podcast who are sitting in that secure job and saying, I've got this day job, and this day job is secure, this day job is low risk. My argument to you is that you're absolutely unquestionably wrong. We live in an environment where security of jobs goes downwards with every passing year. In the 1980s, if you came out of a good school, IBM would basically interview you on campus and pick you up and you'd work there. Well, that was more like the 60s or 70s. But even in the 80s, most people coming out of good schools were getting jobs at good companies and staying there for 4, 5, 6 years. Today, the average American stays in a job for 17 months. Things have changed a great deal from the, I get a job at IBM and I retire 35 years later with pension. Those pensions are gone. Even our 401k plans have been watered down. And so when we look at what has happened, the world has changed. The security of a job has actually declined massively, has declined tremendously. Do you know that the average graduate today, inflation adjusted, is making about $20,000 less than a graduate that came out in 1982? Right? And we all know this, the master's degree is the new bachelor's degree today. If you look at how much money people earn with bachelors and how much they earn with masters today, they're equivalent, right? Maybe slightly above still. But the point is, you need now more education. You have less job security. You're probably going to stay in a job less. And and none of these is as important as what I'm about to say now. There aren't any jobs that I know of in the US, unless if you become a rock star, that give you financial security later in life. So when you're saying that I'm not taking a risk by having a job, you're actually saying to yourself, I'm going to take a greater risk, a much greater risk of zero financial security at some point in the future. So all you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road. And I teach my kids this. I teach my kids, I say this, it's very important to go out and get a job for a few years so that you learn more about corporate America and how large companies or mid-sized companies work together. That process of working together in a team is extraordinarily important and everyone must get it. But then within the first 2 or 3 years, and go to a couple different companies because you want that different flavor, different culture, different feel, different experiences. But by the time you're done with 4 years of job, it's time to go away because for the rest of your life, for better or for worse, you need to control your own destiny. Bottom line, many, many more jobs are going away. So the folks that are not being entrepreneurs are actually taking a much greater risk. It's just that risk increases over time. Today the right kind of company, the right kind of org chart has to have both a remote component and a localized component. So our company has 8 people in the United States and 16 people in other countries. And those 8 people in the United States are also in different metros. So, California's got the biggest chunk of them just because that's where we started. But there's people in other parts of the US as well. And I believe that this 1/3, 2/3 model is phenomenal. It's extremely painful when you get started with it because of the way that you have to grow and because of the fact that most people don't know how to make things work with virtual assistants. So we have 16 full-time virtual assistants. They all work US hours, so 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., unless they're attached to a property and then they work that property's time. And none of them are allowed to work like as consultants. It's like you're an employee just like us. You get holidays, you get time off, you get all of those the typical benefits, but you work your nights because in our case the vast majority of those people are in the Philippines. Some are in India, but the vast majority are in the Philippines. And that org chart of 24 people, I believe, is really one of the key strengths of our organization. And the fact that 2/3 of our employees, don't call them contractors, don't call them virtual assistants, we don't use them that way. The fact that they're offshore gives us an incredible scale of growth. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I have any lower payroll than any of my competitors. I don't. In fact, I would argue that if you took 5 of my competitors and we matched up our org charts, we're spending the same amount on payroll as they are, but we're getting more out of it. So there was no intention at any point to make this about saving money. It isn't, and in fact, you might end up spending a little bit more. It's about boosting your growth, 10xing your growth. We've been able to do 16 syndication projects in the last 2 years, and we know of maybe one other company in our entire nationwide space that's done 16. There's 2 reasons why it's painful. The first one is we are not used, we're not set up, we're not structured to work with people that are remote, especially if they're not from the same culture as ours, right? So the Filipino culture is very different. It's a very soft, very polite culture. They tend not to make suggestions unless you really push them. So it's a very compliant culture, and that's a problem because Americans, by our very nature, are very non-compliant people. And so there's a cultural clash. And so very, very difficult for people to do that. We grow up learning that when I want to bring in an employee, I'm going to have that employee shadow some existing employee, or I'm going to have them shadow me. They're going to sit in the chair next to me, and we're going to talk. That is actually the most inefficient, the most non-scalable way of bringing on employees, but it's the standard. It's the standard. And maybe 90% of employees in the US are hired that way. What really should be the right way of doing things, and that's really your first roadblock, is understanding that there are better ways to onboard employees and better ways to train employees and better ways to hold them accountable. And that the first hurdle is really learning that. When as a company you learn that, you become super powerful because you're onboarding a different way, you're holding people accountable a different way. So that's, to me, that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is that the overall quality of people working as virtual assistants, now I will use that word, is indeed low. A lot of people have had bad experiences. A lot of people have felt that they didn't get value for their money, even though they were paying, 20% of what they would pay in the US. And there is something to that. There is something to that because people who are willing to work nights for years are probably not going to be the most impressive people that, that live in those countries. So there's something to that. And so what people don't have is a quantitative step-by-step way of figuring out exactly how to wean hundreds of candidates and figure out the 1 in 100 or 2 in 100 that are highly superior candidates. Those are your two roadblocks to basically making this work for you. It's really not about fit. Obviously, we interview a large number of them. So the first thing that we do is we standardized our platform, and we standardized on a platform called UpWork. There's cheaper ways to get virtual assistants like onlinejobs.ph or onlinejobs.in. But what we found was by staying with one platform that has a lot of tools to monitor these employees and gives us data about how productive they are, it made an enormous difference to the outcome. So the first thing is we hire them through upwork.com. The second thing is that on upwork.com, you have, let's say just in the Philippines, you probably have 200,000 people. And what folks have not spent any time on is actually going into upwork.com and filtering for quality. And so what we did was we spent a lot of time in our company learning how to filter upwork.com for quality by experimenting with many different kinds of virtual assistants, by interviewing them and seeing if that improved quality. Luckily, all of this is recorded. We have a seminar. It's called, it's on our website, multifamily.com. So we took this, and it's not one of those seminars where you're basically talking like I'm talking now. It's not one of those seminars where you're doing PowerPoint decks. It's a seminar where I'm actually running you through a 15-minute demo of specifically how to use filters in Upwork. I can tell you that our filters, and it takes maybe 3 minutes to use those filters, our filters bring the total talent in the Philippines from 200,000 to 2,600 people. So it filters it down to 1%, and those are the only people we go after to interview. So it's very hard in a podcast format to give you the answers to that, but they're straightforward filters, so I'll just give you a little teaser. Number one, we only hire people that have worked on Upwork.com for at least 3,000, is it? Let me think about that. For about 3,000, 4,000 hours. So that means that they worked 2 years full time. We only work with people that have had at least 20 different employers on Upwork, which means that they've understood a lot of different companies' systems, processes, software. They've gelled with a number of different providers. They've made the necessary changes to their lifestyle, and so on. So there's all of these filters, and as you go through those filters, we look at people where their feedback, Amazon style, their feedback is over 96%. Most people think 90% feedback is good. I can tell you 90% feedback is pure garbage. You would never want to employ somebody that has a 90% feedback on Upwork. We try to stay as close to 100 as possible, but because we hire so many of them, we end up with 96% being our cutoff, though I'd say that 2/3 of our employees are over 98% in terms of their feedback, which is such an incredible feature. I mean, I don't know Thomas Castelli. I don't know what he's working like. So maybe at the best, if I want to hire Thomas, I have to basically go to Brandon and say, hey, Brandon, how's Thomas? And Brandon might say, yeah, he's good. Or maybe Brandon doesn't want to, seem like an evil, ex-boss. So he's like, yeah, no, he's really good. The point is this: quantity. Where can you find a place where you can look at American employees and see for each employee dozens and dozens of ratings and comments from past employees? We all love Amazon ratings, right? And they're not perfect, we know that, but they're a million times better than just going to some no-name website that has no reviews, because I've done that and I've come up with horrible purchases. That's why I trust Amazon. Well, UpWork has those millions of reviews on these people. And we don't just look at the star ratings, 96% and higher. We actually go in, click on it, and actually read the reviews. And when we read the reviews, here's what we are not looking for. So here's a bad employee. This is going to shock you. It says, employee was on time and completed his work as per directions. Bad. Employee did what he was asked. Bad. Here's the only kind of employees we ever invite to interview. This is a phenomenal employee. This was a star. This was a superstar. Of all the people I've hired on UpWork, this was the best. Those are the people we look for. And now we end up with 0.1% of the top virtual assistants in the world. First, you have to understand that the process of managing other people is really all about you training yourself. 90% of management is about what you do, not what other people do. And so we found that we had to really understand ourselves as managers, and we realized that we are not the kind of people that will go write 20-page manuals on step-by-step instructions. So we started searching for some very, very simple, very, very quick ways of giving instructions to employees. And we found two different ways, and I think I can demonstrate both of them to you. So I'm going to click manage here on my phone so I can actually show this to you guys, and you'll be able to hear it. But before I show you that one, what we do is we use a tool called Loom. Loom is a plugin into Chrome, right? So when you're opening the Chrome browser, you've got Loom on the top right. And whenever we want to give people instructions, whenever we want to give them a process or a task, the first thing that we do is we click on Loom and we click record. And now, just like this podcast is being recorded, it records our screen, it records our video, and it records our audio. And now we start talking about what it is that we intend to do, all the different things. We might open a Google Doc. We might start saying, well, put this in this spreadsheet and put this in this row and make this pivot table, blah, 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 blah. And think about it. If you're just talking for 2 minutes, even with all the oops and oh, let me start over again, even with that, in 2 to 3 minutes, you can go through the same content that would normally take you 2 to 3 hours to write with screenshots. When we click on stop, Loom immediately sends a copy of the video to the cloud, and it makes it copies the URL of that video into our clipboard. So now we open an email, a new email, type the employee's name that's supposed to get this information, and then we do something that's magical. Here's the part that most people forget. So let's say I'm supposed to be giving instructions to Brandon, right? So I record this 3-minute video. Hey, Brandon, do this, do that, open this spreadsheet, blah, blah, blah. And then if I just send it to Brandon, there's no accountability because Brandon can choose to do it or choose to forget it. And he can also choose to defer it. Maybe he doesn't forget it, but he just pushes the can down. So we have the following 4 or 5 systems to prevent this from happening. The first thing is we never send an email just to Brandon. In the to line, we also send an email to Asana, which is our project management system. Asana allows each project that's in Asana to have an email address. So for example, if Brandon is my virtual assistant and sets appointments for me, I'm going to type in Brandon, and then I'm going to type in Asana space appointments. And now what is happening is when I send that, and I'm very careful with subject lines, because guess what? As soon as I click send, Asana is going to take what's in the subject line, create a new task inside of that project. It already knows which projects because I use the email address of that project. And then it's going to assign to Brandon this task. Okay. And now Brandon has to go into that task, listen to the 3-minute video, and then guess what he has to do first? He has to type out their understanding of that video into the task. So instead of me doing that job, they're doing that job. And when they're doing that job, it means that the onus is on them to really understand the video because they have to type it out, right? And then the task is assigned a timeline, right? And by the end of the day, they have to make sure that they've got the due date in there after conversations with me or you know, a Slack chat with me. And then we have another employee that every Friday publishes a list of every Asana task in the company, all of the people that have those tasks and how many people are past due. Published on a Slack channel week after week, where everyone can see who's slacking. You know, that's definitely a pun there. But basically, this gets published. Those people are then given a random amount of time. So we used to say, oh, we're going to check again to see if you've improved it and gone and cleaned up your tasks in Asana. Now we don't. We say, this week there's too many people that have too many tasks past due. A random check will be conducted. Sometimes we do the random check in an hour, and sometimes we do it the next day. So now people are like, oh my God, I'm over the cutoff, right? Because their row is now marked in red. So now those people run around and get their tasks all updated. So by Tuesday, and the report comes out on Monday, by Tuesday, everyone in the company is on time with their tasks. They may not have completed their tasks. That wasn't the point, right? But they know what their tasks are, and they can't forget about those tasks. So task management is all about having another virtual assistant. As you can imagine, this is done by a person in the Philippines, basically staying on top of the project management system so that nobody can be late on their tasks. That gives people a huge incentive to work hard. So we love UpWork because UpWork puts a tracker on the employee's computer. And that tracker is both a clock. So if they, you know, for them to bill any time, they have to go into UpWork, select the employer, because some of them may be working with more than one employer, and then they have to say start, and now it's tracking their time. But it's not just tracking their time, it's actually tracking to see how busy they are. By looking at their mouse movements, their keystrokes, it's assigning a number to every segment of the day. And what we do is we have a virtual assistant that goes into UpWork and grabs every single employee, every single person that's on UpWork. We grab their previous week's data from UpWork on how busy they were. Each day, when the employee finishes their day, they have to go into Asana, into a task that's created, and they have to post something which says, this is what I did today. And out of a ranking of 5 to 10, right, with 10 being, I'm dying, 5 being, please, for God's sake, give me more work, right, and so on and so forth, they have to put in a ranking every day. And you might say, people have tried that, it doesn't work. Yes, but there's a catch. When people do that, let's say somebody says, I'm an 8 every day. Okay, or they say I'm a 10 every day. They just want to bullshit you and they're not really doing anything. They're watching Filipino YouTube, right? Here's what happens. Each week on Monday, we take the average of their ratings. Let's say their average is 9 out of 10. And then we go to Upwork.com, download its ratings, and we match them up. And we build a bar graph, one that has an orange line and a green line. Well, we also do the public shaming this way, by posting that graph on Monday and saying, you guys all know this, right? The orange bar, which is Upwork's rating of you, has to be higher than your own rating of yourself. If your rating is higher than Upwork's, then you have an inflated opinion of how busy you are. But if Upwork's rating is higher than yours, that's really good because Upwork thinks you're working really, really hard. So people might think, well, yeah, but they can randomly type keystrokes. Yeah, but you'd have to do that all day long, type in random keystrokes. Most people just get to work. So bottom line is, now we know exactly how hard they're working because we're matching their expectations of how hard they work with Upwork's, putting them together, making it public, making the public shaming obvious who the most productive employees are, and also making it obvious who the least productive employees are. Side benefits are incredible. We've had employees, I mean, normally in a normal company, you see employees just bitching and moaning and complaining about how they're working harder than everybody else. Well, we have a reverse company. We have employees coming and telling us, hey, I've been looking at the trends. It looks like George, I mean, this guy's just working himself to death. I see what's going on with this guy. I know he's very hardworking. And so employees actually start giving us feedback and say things. We've had employees constantly come to us and say, hey, I have a little bit more slack. Can I take some of George's tasks? Now they know where those tasks can come from because they're seeing the impact of what's happening. And then we've also had people who've come to us and said, you know what, I'm not busy enough. Could you really help me? And both of those things are very strong for a powerful company so that you can have happy employees and happy employers. So it's all about having a company where things work by themselves instead of you forcing them to, which is a standard case. Most good actions are being forced. But why force it if you can just have openness and things come into equilibrium by themselves? It became so cumbersome that what we do now is we create Asana templates. So for example, if we're doing a syndication, there's 300 to 400 tasks connected to that. So we create a template, and that template has all 300 or 400 tasks with the Loom videos in there. The plate spinner, my partner Anna Myers, basically goes in, launches that new project, and in a 1 hour kickoff meeting assigns the 400 tasks to different people. Or actually she assigns subtasks, subsections, and then people go in and basically take those tasks on. So by doing that, when a person leaves, all we have to do is take their tasks and assign it to the new person and tell them, go into the tasks and watch the videos. If you tie too many tasks in, then you have to have too many updates, Tom. So it's better to keep Loom videos to about 2 minutes, and you break them. Let's say you have a really major task with 5 sections. Well, record 5 different videos. That way, if one section changes, you're not messing with the other videos. I have lots of money. I try to retire. First month of retirement is awesome. Second month is okay. The third month, I'm trying to kill myself. And I'm like, okay, I got to go do something else. And I thought about syndication, and I'd done a lot of real estate. So I jump in, and my partner, very smart guy, and we buy a property in the south side of Chicago. And what we were excited about by this property was its potential. It was right next to Jackson Park, and 100 yards away from the property, Tiger Woods had announced that he was going to build a championship golf course. And about 350 or 400 yards away, President Obama had announced that the park that was next to us, Jackson Park, was going to be one of the 2 finalist sites for his library, which isn't a library. It's a $2 billion project with retail, with 20 or 30 restaurants, with multifamily. I mean, he's basically building an iconic project that he can be very proud of. And his wife, Michelle, actually lived briefly in one of the 6 buildings that we purchased. And so she was basically looking to lift that area up. And then there was this other developer, the McCaffreys, who had basically bought the US Steel factory a mile down from us, and were building somewhere around 12,000 homes on them. So they'd already spent $55 million, creating a roadway access off the freeway. So we're looking at all of these projects and going, wow, this is going to be incredible. This is going to grow. It's going to explode. It couldn't be worse. And when we did that, I think that we overlooked or paid less attention than we should have to the reality on the ground, which was that the area was distressed. The area had, I would say, had tenants where the quality of the tenant pool was not very good. And so we buy the property, and roughly 10 days after we buy the property, I show up at the property along with my partner. And I'm a math guy. I basically look at, okay, how many leads does this property need? How many leases do you need to sign every week to stay in the 90s in occupancy? Because we needed to stay in the 90s for that property to work. And so I did the math on leases. Then I did the math on how many leads the property was getting, and discovered to my shock that the property was only getting about 10% of the lead flow that it was supposed to get, 10%. And that our occupancy would reduce very rapidly. And I'm like, but how did the previous owner keep the occupancy at 90% while he was selling to us? Well, very quickly we figured out the answer, that owner had basically said, oh, you're a lead, you want to rent in my property? Do you have a pulse? Great, you're in. So basically anybody and everybody that wanted to lease at the property, regardless of a horrible record, bankruptcy, landlords that hated them, never paid rent on time, all of those people had showed up at our property. So we not only had a problem with new leads, we also had a problem with a really horrible tenant community that had to be turned over. And so I looked at the problem, and initially, I have to tell you, Thomas, I was that W-2 job was looking really, really good. I mean, I was like, oh my God, first project. I mean, how's this going to work? So then I thought about it, and I said, so what are my skills? What do I know? And the first thing that came to my mind was outsourcing. So the very next day, I hired two teams. One was in the Ukraine and one was in the Philippines. The Philippines team was, phone pounders, and the Ukrainian people, their job was to basically figure out every rental site in the US, that in the US, and get these buildings listed on these sites like 10x or 50x more than any other building. And so we did some stuff which most people may consider gray, borderline gray. For 2 weeks, I made 150 calls a day. So working 7 days a week. So in 14 days, I made about 2,300 phone calls, actual phone calls, had about 800, 900 conversations, scheduled over 100 appointments. Of those, about 60 people showed up at the property, about 40 people signed apps, and 22 signed leases. So me, as the call center dude, ended up signing 22 leases at a property in I would say a 4-week time frame, because it takes a while for people to sign leases. And that really started to make a tremendous impact. And to date, that property, 95% of its leases have been signed because of this marketing aggregation that we did. So, the moral of the story is, I mean, and by the way, it wasn't a great success. I don't have a story to say that that property made huge amounts of money for its investors. No, we struggled greatly. But I can tell you that that property would have been lost to the bank, given back to the bank, all money lost for investors within the next 3 or 4 months if we hadn't managed to find a way out. Adversity is not about succeeding. Adversity is about trying. And so I'm very proud that we gave it a try and came up with a method that worked. I think that one of the things that we pat ourselves on the back on for this property, clearly, I mean, we gave too much credence to things that would happen in the future. And you might ask me, what happened to those things? Well, the Caffertys got into a negotiation dispute with the city of Chicago, canceled their project. Tiger Woods said, build the library first, then I'll build the golf course. And the library got delayed by 4 years because the Friends of Jackson Park sued the Obama Foundation because they wanted to keep the park as it is. Of course, they lost, but it took 4 years for the library construction to get back on schedule. But so the key message that we had learned there was, look, we gave too much credence to what is going to happen in the future and not enough to what was happening on the ground. And if we want to prevent that from happening, we need to be more transparent with investors. So we started giving them monthly updates on how the property was doing, how many evictions there were, how many challenges the property was facing. There were gunshots. We had a fire at the property. We had a person die at the property because of a violent crime. We just chose not to hide it from our investors. We just gave that information to them on an ongoing basis. And I'm proud to say that I still have 4 or 5 of those investors that have invested with us in other projects. That's actually the thing I'm most proud of, because those people knew that we didn't do well in this project. Those people knew that we should have been more careful picking the property. But because of our subsequent actions, the trust was maintained. And I believe that given that we're going into a recession here, that message, should be heard by syndicators. One thing that I can tell you, my current company, Grocapitus, we have never one time, and we have so many projects, right? We have 14 projects right now that we're reporting to investors on. We've never missed our monthly update by more than 1 day. And that you have to make the ethos of your company. If you're looking to be a syndicator and take other people's money, I don't think that you need to be magic. I don't think that you necessarily need to be phenomenal at growing their money, because if you were, that would imply you had experience, so you'd never really start. So how would new syndicators get started? So as a new syndicator, you may not be fantastic with the experience side. So try to be fantastic with the communication side. Communicate with your investors on and structure your company around that communication. So we are extremely proud of the way that we communicate with our investors, both pre-COVID and post-COVID. We're talking about being employee-centric. To me, because I'm a syndication business, I want to be investor-centric. And too many people are property-centric in their business. And I think that is not, obviously properties are important, that's where you make your money, but by being investor centric, you will always be property centric. Because what you're doing is you're reporting very transparently, good and bad, to investors, which will really drive you to get returns of the property. But if you're property centric, you might be doing okay with the property. If you're not reporting that to your investors, you're not going to get that positive vibe from the investors. You're not going to get that trust for your future projects, and your company won't grow. And the lack of that growth is going to affect your existing projects. Have a website, and it's called multifamilyu.com, and Brandon's actually been a speaker there. So multifamilyu.com, we started it off as a portal for all things multifamily, and then we sort of grew it to all things multifamily and commercial. So we do between 30 and 40 deep dive webinars. They're 90 minutes long each year, and we get about, I'd say about 50,000 people that enroll for those webinars. And the webinars are on all sorts of topics, but some of the most interesting ones that have the most amount of interest. One is a method that I developed called Location Magic, which allows you to figure out the best cities and the best neighborhoods in America to invest in 10 minutes on your own. There's no product to buy and no upsell. So come in, enjoy that. And then the other one, as you can imagine, is the one that basically says 10x your business by using virtual assistants. And it is a step-by-step demo-based system, no PowerPoint, demo-based system that shows you how to hire virtual assistants. And if while you're doing that, if you would like to invest in syndications, you're going to see information about those on the website as well. So multifamilyu.com is the best way to get in touch with me. The other way is that I'm very lucky and very unlucky in that I'm the only Neal Bawa on the World Wide Web. So if you type in NEAL BAWA, the first 100 or 200 articles are going to be about me. So all the gossip, all the bad stuff, and all the good stuff is going to be there. So check it out.